The goal was to be on network television. I wanted to be Peter Jennings or Bryant Gumbel or Max Robinson or one of those guys. I wanted to be a reporter and then an anchor. That was my goal.
Welcome to Story and Craft. Now, here's your host, Mark Preston.
All right, here we go. Another episode of Story and Craft. Welcome back. Thank you so much for checking back in. Hey, if this is your first episode, thanks a lot. Appreciate you stopping by. Going to be a great show today. In fact, you might hear some snoring in a moment. I promise you, it's not me. It's Ranger, our studio dog, our little golden retriever who is almost 9 months old now. He's under my feet. We're on the verge of loud snoring, so you might hear him, you might not. Today, we are sitting down chatting with Don Lemon. You remember Don from CNN? He had a show there. No longer with CNN, but he's got a YouTube show called The Don Lemon Show. Now, Don is an author. He's got a few books out. The latest book just came out a little while back. It is called I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. You can pick it up, of course, all the online retailers. But as Don and I were discussing, go into your local bookstore and pick it up. In fact, if we talk about any book with any one of our guests, find a local bookstore, go in there and pick it up. Plus, bookstores are kind of cool to roll into and just kind of cruise around and spend an afternoon with a cup of coffee. Now, don't forget everything you could possibly want to know about Story and Craft. All of our guests, like Don Lemon, you can jump in there, check out all of his information, his socials. Just go to storyandcraftpod.com. That's storyandcraftpod.com. Now, Story and Craft is on your favorite podcast app, so if you could do me a favor, if you would, follow the show. Just click and follow. That way you get a notification every time a new episode comes out. Also, drop a star, a little review. A little bit of love is always greatly appreciated. And as you do that, as you follow the show and as you like it and leave a review, I want you to imagine I'm reaching through your phone or whatever you're listening on and giving you a big hug. And thank you. I hope it didn't make that awkward. All right, tell you what, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Really enjoyed this conversation with Don Lemon. He's got a great story to tell, so let's jump into it. Today is Don Lemon Day, right here on Story and Craft.
How are you?
I am wonderful, and I bet it's days like this you kind of miss having an engineering crew around you. But no, you sound wonderful, my friend. So I'm kind of peeking out your window, seeing what the weather is like in New York right now.
It's a little gray outside, and it's not usually that gray. Where are you?
I am located on the southern tip of Texas, an island called South Padre. Once I got my youngest daughter off to college, I was like, it's time for the Jimmy Buffett lifestyle. So
I know South Padre. I grew up in Louisiana, and we used to go down a lot to Texas.
You're originally from Louisiana, but you're from, is it Baton Rouge or is it New Orleans? So where'd you emanate from?
I'm originally from a little town called Port Allen, which is just west of Baton Rouge, just over the bridge, the Mississippi River Bridge. And then we eventually moved to East Baton Rouge. But my mom is still there. My mom moved back to Port Allen because my dad died. We moved because my mom remarried.
I remember seeing your mother on the, for the sake of full disclosure, my kids always ask about you and New Year's, because we would always actually come here to vacation. And you would, I think, for at least 1 or 2 years, you were actually on, 1 year you were in Bourbon Street, at a bar on Bourbon Street for New Year's with, was it Brooke? Was that her name? Brooke?
Brooke Bowen, yeah.
And then the other one, y'all did it at kind of out in the street. And I think your mother was there for that, I believe, for one of your other New Year's things. So, but that was funny enough. My kids always made a point of that whenever we were on vacation. We would always do that right around New Year's.
That New Year's Eve show. And now they kind of miss that it's not there every time. They're like, and you on New Year's Eve, I really missed it. I used to watch you.
Well, so it's nice to see folks let their hair down who are, not able to throughout the year because of the nature of the format, But here's the thing. When I worked in radio many years ago, it brought me there from Dallas as working in radio. And they had me do my very first year there. They had me do a show from a balcony on Bourbon Street. And instead of a 4-hour shift, they extended it to like 7 or 8. It was nuts. So like for 5 days in a row, I was on a balcony on Bourbon Street for 8 hours straight. So as you can tell, I still get like PTSD anytime I cross Canal Street into the quarter. So it's a little much, but it's an experience certainly. But of course you had the benefit when you were down there of the production crew helping you out and me, the lonely radio guy, would be on the balcony. People would be coming by like, "Hey, man, let me tell you how Mardi Gras works." I'm like, "Oh, fill me in." So
You have a great radio voice, by the way, Mark.
you're very kind.
Does
But
anyone ever confuse you with another Mark Preston?
it's funny you say that, but only once, I think, once or twice. I think there was an email something or other that happened, and I didn't know there was going to be out there. There was a Mark Preston at CNN, I think, isn't there? Okay.
But he's MARK, and he's a friend. And I was just wondering if you guys ever get, if they ever confuse you, or so maybe you get emails and
No,
stuff.
I no longer get messages from the club because my dues are past due. So I need to, I pay it, and that way I'll, hear back from everybody, see how they're doing. But you said the weather's not too terribly great. Now the question is, do you miss the Louisiana weather ever? Do you ever kind of miss that? Take a shower, go outside, feel like you never dried off feeling?
So I got to tell you, I was in Louisiana for Essence Fest, and I think it was July or August, I forget. You forget when you leave, and then you come back and you go, "Oh, I remember this."
Oh yeah.
Not only is it like a heat wave, but it's a heat wave with a shower mist with warm water, not cool water, and it's oppressively hot. I remember thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to pass out," because I turned down a car to go to the convention center from my hotel because the traffic was so bad.
Mhm.
And they're like, "You sure you want to do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's just a couple of blocks, 3-4 blocks." And I got out of the hotel, I got a block away, and I said, "Why didn't I take that car?" Because it's so. Do you see behind me?
Yeah, you got a construction guy out there. That's a first. Never had seen a construction guy come up in somebody's building before, but
I think they just hit the balcony on my building, and I don't know if you heard that. It's so weird that we would be talking about it, and then all of a sudden, they would crash into the balcony. So
are they the window washers, or are they doing some
No,
work
they're
out there?
repointing the bricks.
Okay. Well, everything okay?
Yeah, everything's good. I'm good.
Good. How things been going? It's so funny. I told my daughter Emma, I told her I was talking to. He's like, "Are you going to ask him anything about politics?" I was like, "Maybe a little bit, but it's really about he's got a new book and everything." How many books have you written? Because I seem to remember you had one out. It feels like not too long ago. 3. Goodness, 3.
One in 2011, one in 2021, and now one in 2024.
Is writing it like a cathartic experience? I mean, when you sit down, no, I'm going to do a book, or is it kind of like that being in school and you have a research
Mark,
paper coming up?
It's painful. I mean, you do have cathartic moments, and especially, some of the cathartic moments is like when it's done and you go back and you try to edit it. But it's painful because you want to write it, and you have this thing in you, and you want to say something, and then you get into it, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, maybe I don't have something to say. Maybe it's not enough. I'm not sure if this is worth writing." And so you go through that whole thing. And then once you start writing, you just, you get into a rhythm about it. And then it's over. And then you go into a process, which I actually think is harder, Mark, and that's selling the book, right? Because, sometimes it catches on, like, you have the rocket ride to the top, and sometimes it's a slow build, and it just depends. But yeah, so the process of writing it is tough.
I can tell you that what would stress me out the most is thinking, okay, I have so many ideas. I don't know which ones to kind of pick out, how to put them all together, and that, do you rely on somebody like a good editor to go to you like, "Okay, this is great, but, chop this out," or, or they're like, I don't know. The whole process of writing a book would just kind of make me a little stressed just because of the having too many options, I think.
Yeah, well, you have to have a good editor or a good collaborator. That's someone that can help you put your thoughts together.
Mhm.
And I have a really great collaborator. And this one was a little bit harder to write than the one before this, but it was This Is the Fire, This Is the Fire, My Search for God in America,
Mhm.
which was kind of a response to James Bond, which was kind of a response to James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time.
Mhm.
And I wrote it during COVID when all the things were happening with George Floyd. And so that one I had been thinking about for a while and wanting to do it, but the publishers kept saying, "No one reads those kind of books," and blah, blah, blah. And then George Floyd happened. They're like, "Remember that idea you had for a book?
Yeah.
Let's do it." And
It's
so,
almost like finding the right time. I think that,
Yes.
that's, you just never know the way
timing
that.
is everything.
And I remember it well. Was it 21? Was it 2021? when
Mhm.
George Floyd and all that was going on. And what about that kind of was the impetus for you to sit down and want to write the book? What was that you were wanting to you kind of want to say or comment on?
Well, we were all sitting at home, Mark, watching, either our phones or our televisions or our computer screens or whatever it is, because we couldn't go outside. There was nothing we could do. And then these horrible images come over our screen of a man who's, with a police officer kneeling on his neck until he died. And we couldn't believe it was happening. We were watching a man die in real time. And then all the protests started happening. And, everyone, became suddenly, some of the country who had not believed it became aware of, police brutality and excessive force. And the talk around racism and Black Lives Matter really started gaining steam, and people started calling me saying, "Hey, this is awful. This is now real for me. I did not realize that this existed because it just didn't exist for me. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?" Even like people who are in my company, bosses and higher ups and people in the C-suites, they're calling me. And I told them, and I said, "You know what? I'm just going to write a book." And the book that I've been wanting to write. And, it took me 4 months, which was quick. And it was like from start to finish to when it came out. And it was amazing. Well, not when it came out, but it came out I think in March of 2021. And that one was a cathartic experience, but also there was a built-in discipline there because we were all in a pandemic and I would have to drive 2 hours to work and 2 hours from work.
Really?
Okay. Yes, because I was living. My partner didn't want. He's like, I can't be in the city. It was too scary for him. We were lucky enough that we have a house that we go to on the weekends sometimes, and we ended up living there for 14 months. But long story short, it was the close proximity. The city was a ghost town. We were seeing, mortgage really refrigerators, morgue
Right.
refrigerators on the street. Mobile morgues outside, and it was just too awful and depressing. So it's not that we abandoned the city. I came into work, and we would come in and spend some days in the city, but for the most part, we were living in Long Island, and so I would have to drive back and forth. Someone was driving me 2 hours a day. 4 hours a day, 2 hours to work, 2 hours back. And that gave me the discipline because in that time I would sit and write.
I certainly help with focus, sit down there and kind of crank it out. I want to go a little origin story. We did talk a little bit about a second ago about being from Baton Rouge, but I'm curious of the arc of experience that got you from Louisiana to New York. The only other person I'm thinking of, like Wynton Marsalis, these guys that kind of came out of New Orleans, ended up in New York. So what kind of was your path? I'm assuming local news figured in there prominently, I'm assuming.
But not local news in Louisiana. I left Louisiana, again, which I write about. I left Louisiana in, my journalism professor told me I would never make it. And there was a whole lot of things around racism there. And then I also wanted to be free. And so I wanted to come out and be myself because I couldn't in Louisiana. It was just the time that we were in. And so I left to move to New York. And then I took a job eventually in news in New York, starting at the bottom as a trainee in the newsroom, and then a desk assistant to the assignment editor. And then the assignment editor, a field producer, a satellite feeds coordinator, writer, and so on. And then,
you really did come up from really
I came up from nowhere,
TV,
from the bottom. Because and also at the time, Mark, I was going to school. I hadn't finished at LSU. I'd left. I was like, okay, I'm not dealing with this because I knew from my performance I could be a judge of people's performance. Even if you're not a professor, you understand if someone's good on camera and if they're good behind the anchor desk, even if you're a student or if you're a good reporter or whatever. So all of that was good. And for some reason, my journalism professor told me I wouldn't make it. And I was like, okay. And I was very aware of the competition around me, and I was a lot better than them. And I said, that can only be one thing. And there were other examples of it because it's Louisiana. It's a deep red South. And so I got to New York without a degree. I started working in the newsroom. And while I was working, I also went to school and finished school at the same time. And then eventually and I began reporting, very sporadically for the station, just off and on here. There was a community affairs show called the McCreary Report. which is like urban affairs. And I started doing some reports for them. And then I finally got to put a tape together because I was the assignment editor.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent my tape out. I got hired by a Fox station because I worked for a Fox station in New York. And they saw me, they're like, we want to keep you in the family. So I started working for a Fox station in Birmingham, Alabama as the weekend anchor and weekday reporter, 3 days a week reporting, Saturday and Sunday anchoring the morning show, and then coming back and anchoring an evening show. My last semester at Brooklyn College, I actually did it through the mail from Birmingham, Alabama to New York. This is before the internet was a thing. And I actually finished my last semester because I got a job before I graduated. And they were like, we can't keep you from a job. So I got the opportunity. So while I was in Birmingham, yes, I was finishing school, but that wasn't the big deal. The big deal was actually trying to finish school in New York and work. That was more of a stressful.
Well, was TV the destination for you always, or were you thinking maybe print? Okay, so TV was something that fired you up, and that's the same thing for me when I was in radio, and it was the strangest thing. You really kind of paid your dues and the number one market in America. That's something else. And then you go to Birmingham, and I had already worked on the radio in Dallas, and I'd gone to school at a couple schools. I ended up at Texas Tech University in Lubbock. So it's a whole different feeling coming out of the major markets into a smaller. It was kind of like, okay. First thing I noticed is I did a lot more of the work, when you went to a smaller market.
But it actually worked out for me because, the traineeship in the newsroom paid off, and it also helped me with my courses. Because they would say, okay, let's go to production class, and they would show you how to light, and they would and then writing, and they would say, okay, we're going to write intros to news stories, and I'm like, this is what I do every day at work. Mm-hmm. So the teacher would give us a story, and then I'd write the intro, and they'd go, wow, you're good at this. And I'm like, yeah, this is.
Well, once upon a time, just a few months ago, somebody told me I was not. So thank you.
Yeah.
Take that, LSU. Now, the question is, whenever I meet somebody who's from Louisiana or from New Orleans, but I don't know about Baton Rouge if it's the same, but when you take them out of out of Louisiana for a while, it kind of feels like a fish out of water. Did you feel like that, or did you kind of feel like you were more able to spread your wings when you left? Was it intimidating? Was it because here you are, a Baton Rouge kid, and you're going out that way? Or was it exactly what you needed in that time in your life?
It was all of the above. It was intimidating because all of the kids who were there, right? Because I was a kid then. This was all normal for them. And when you don't know anything else, I mean that's the way they grew up and lived in New York City. They went to NYU, and they went to schools on the East Coast, and everyone got a great internship, and they all went on to progress and actually be quite successful in the business. I did not grow up in Louisiana in that environment, right? I grew up sort of, not that I was like poor, but I just sort of did not feel, I grew up in a place where I wasn't sort of entitled to do, what I'm going to do, or I didn't have like a parent who was sort of a legacy in the business, or my parents didn't know someone, or I didn't have connections. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And most of the people I worked with had connections. How did you get this job? Well, my dad knew this person, or my such and such is friends, or this person is my neighbor, or I went to school with their kid. And that's how they were all getting their jobs. I didn't have that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're going in at really weird hours and working at a TV station, and and everybody's going out at night, and you're going and working.
Yeah. So it was intimidating, but it was exactly what I needed.
In your overall experience, and when you're doing like local market affiliate work, did you go, ultimately, I want to do something network? Or did you say, hey, I want to be the lead anchor on the 5 and 6, 10 p.m. newscaster? What was the goal for you when you were kind of cutting your teeth doing the thing in TV?
The goal was to be on network television. I wanted to be Peter Jennings or Bryant Gumbel or Max Robinson or one of those guys. I wanted to be at least, do something on starting locally. I wanted to be a local news. I wanted to be a reporter and then an anchor. That was my goal. And I was determined to get there. And it was scary. A lot of people, like those jobs that when I was at WNYW, some of those people are still there. Mm-hmm. And some of those people wanted to be on-air personalities and reporters, and they just sort of got a job as a field producer or a producer or whatever. Not that that's a bad thing, because many of them became news executives and they're very successful, but they wanted to have on-air careers and never did. And I said, you know what, I want to be on air, and that's what I'm going to do. So I left New York City. I could have, I could have rose up the ranks at the station, become a producer and then an executive producer, and then maybe perhaps a news director or whatever. And I'm sure I would have had a good path there. But I did what I wanted to do, and I think that I did okay.
Some folks want to be the 10 p.m. anchor. Some people want to be the network guy. Everybody's got a different path they're wanting to chart. So when you kind of get into the flow of things, you got your day to day, and here you are saying you're commuting in to work 2 hours back and forth. What about that do you miss, and what don't you miss about doing, having the, I don't want to say pressure, but having the responsibility, the weight to carry a show? What do you miss and what don't you miss about doing that?
Wow, if you had asked me that, a year ago or so, my answer would have been different. I miss sort of the daily, no, I take that back. I was going to say I miss the daily routine of it. I miss working with such great journalists. I used to have a giant team of journalists around me and other reporters and other anchors who you can bounce stories off of, or you can, something that inspires you. And sometimes a bit of a competition. And so I miss that. But do I miss the daily routine or the daily grind? No. Do I miss, sort of where the business was going? No. But I'm enjoying the freedom of this. So there are very few times where I want to be, if anywhere, I want to be, I won't say back where I was, but maybe on a network television. And usually that's only when something big happens.
Yeah. That's got to be like a big itch for you that you can't scratch, I'm assuming, and there's something you just figure you can add some context or commentary to. But, and going back to my radio days, I know when there is either a big management change or a programming change, it's a much more micro version. But I know that everything that kind of transpired at CNN, of course, they went through a tremendous amount of flux. But one thing I'm curious about, if we were to, hit rewind and we somehow had a time machine and you were able to go back and some like broadcast journalism genie said to you, okay, Don, you've got 1 year or 6 months, whatever, make whatever changes you think would be best to move in the direction of better journalism, better network, whatever. You're now the CEO. Kind of what changes do you think would have been adequate or are necessary now in news?
Well, look, I'm not, and I don't know if anybody really cares about my opinion, but I'm not speaking of CNN in general. I had these conversations all the time, and when I was there, is that I felt that we had to be careful with false equivalency, and you'd say one side did one thing, and so therefore that means the other side did something equally as bad just because, or if not, you'd have to pretend that they did, so that you could have this sort of fake or false, thing about equal, right? Because everything is not equal. It's not everything is 50-50. Sometimes one political party or one candidate, sometimes they do things that are really bad and the other side doesn't, and I'm not talking.
And that must be very frustrating when that gets interpreted as being biased when it's just,
when it's just the truth.
Yeah.
And so I would, if I could go back and change anything, or if I were a news executive, I would continue to try to make people aware, or I would hope that my awareness of it would have happened much sooner. I wouldn't think that I had to put someone on who was an election denier or lying about, anything. I wouldn't feel that I'd have to put that person on the air or give them a platform to spread misinformation.
I've always been curious about this. When it's your show, how much autonomy do you have to create the stories you want to create? Typically, every situation's a little bit different, but to create the stories, to follow things you want, percentage-wise, how much do you need to run by somebody, go, is this cool? Or do they say, hey, it's your couple hours, do your thing?
Yeah, now it's me. I just say, this is what I want to do, and that's it, right? Before, I have an executive producer, and I have people. We sort of weigh. We've been discussing things now. I've gotten like a couple of texts while you were. Well, we've been talking, saying, "Do you want to do this? How much hurricane do you want to do?" That sort of thing for our show. We have a live show at 5 o'clock. So how much of it wasn't? No one really ever, Mark, told me what to say, or that we had to cover something. We just knew. Whatever was in the zeitgeist. If there was a big story like today, it would be obviously Zelensky is in town or was in town and was, he met with the vice president. He also met with the former president. So any person with any sort of editorial compass with half a brain knows that those are the stories that you're going to have to cover. And then the other things that were towards the back end of the newscast, we had pretty good editorial control over. And so for us, it would just be trying to figure out what got priority in the limited amount of time that we had. So no one ever told us we had to say anything. Sometimes, yes, you have got to cover the debate. Okay, we're not very far off of the debate because that's what everybody's doing. That's the editorial direction of the network today, which is understandable. That's not, pushing someone in a certain direction. The debate is a big thing. People need to be, and we have to inform an electorate. It is our duty as journalists to do that. But it wasn't someone saying, you must cover something and you must cover it in this way. I don't know about other networks, but had never been told what to say on CNN. Now, that was for 16 years. It was different the last year or so when I was there.
When everything was kind of in flux, do you feel like there was a lot of changes for the sake of change? It's just a new coat of paint on the walls or something like that? Or do you think there was a real direction about where the past president, where he wanted to take things? Is that what you feel like was going on at CNN during that time?
Well, I mean, listen, publicly, I'm not saying anything out of school, right? This has been reported publicly. They have said that they wanted to move the network in a different direction. They said they wanted it to become, move it to the center, right? And so moving it to the center, if you believe the network is left, that means moving it to the right. So they wanted to move the network to the right. And so that was, I figured that I wasn't in that plan, right? And, that for some people who were there was a concern about, who to give a platform to that we wouldn't at the network have previously given a platform to. And that's like election deniers and, sort of conspiracy theorists or, people who were fringe. So there was a lot of consternation among the journalists who were there. And I think that they felt pressure to put people on just for the sake of false equivalency. Yeah. I'm not saying that was a real thing, but I think that was a real pressure that people felt.
Right. Because I know the idea they said that it's too opinionated, whatever. But I remember when the programming kind of shifted, I think, is when the original plan, I think, after 7 or so on CNN was going to be some original programming like W. Kamau Bell and Anthony Bourdain. And
good memory.
When that changed and then you and Cuomo were doing your thing, it just kind of felt like to me CNN was saying, okay, this block, we're going to have commentary. We're going to have a little bit more exploration of a topic or something. That kind of made sense. But I think some people interpreted that as being biased in some way. And I think it's just a point of view somebody's taking. And that was the thing that I think is missing a little bit because I know my kids, you and Cuomo, it's just a time when they were in high school. Y'all kind of, I guess I was just watching it a lot. Or they, whenever, it just would be on TV. And I think they became fans of you after your New Year's Eve broadcast. I think that's, it's kind of hard not to have recognition with kids like, we like this guy. Going forward, now you got your show on YouTube. It's still on YouTube, correct?
On YouTube, it's on X, it's on iHeart, Spotify.
Oh, so so you actually ended up getting on X?
No, I posted on X. The original plan was, here's the original plan. You're talking about the Musk thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Here's the original. The original plan was to have the Don Lemon Show and to have it run on anywhere that you can get your streaming. The difference is that X needed and publicly courted me to come on to their platform to do a content deal with them to sort of moderate the network, right? Because it was becoming so far right extreme that they said that Elon Musk said, we want someone like you to come on because he deemed me to be left, right? To
Right.
sort of moderate, to be a counter to that. And so my deal with them was a distribution or a content deal. And it was, they would get some exclusive material for a certain amount of time, and then it would go everywhere else. So it was just a content deal. I was not working for them. They had no editorial control over my show. It's just like a distribution, like, Apple or Spotify calls up and says, hey, we want to run your show on our channel. Like, how do we work that sort of thing out? It's like, okay, great. But, I'm already on Apple Music. That's fine. And then we'll do a deal with you and blah, blah, blah. And then iHeart says, oh, we know you're doing a deal with Spotify and Apple. What do we need to do in order to get you on our platform? And then same thing with X. We know you're going on this platform or whatever. What do we need to do to get on our platform? And can you give us some exclusive material, something that's exclusive to us? Sure, let's work on that deal, and we'll come up with a deal to do that. But it wasn't the Don Lemon show on, the X Don Lemon show. It was the Don Lemon show. X was a distribution partner, and they wanted some exclusive material that would eventually, within 24 or 48 hours, run everywhere else anyway.
Right.
So,
kind of like a first look where people, jump on X. They always get it's always going to be fresh on X.
Yeah. And in radio, right, if you have a sponsor or if you have either a business or an entity or whatever, and they'll say, we need some exclusive programming. Can you do something on the stock market sponsored by blah, blah, blah for this amount of time or one day a week? And then you do a show for them that's focused on the stock market. So that's it.
The thing that was curious to me is that here you are, you interviewed Elon Musk, and before you can even air the interview, he decided to kind of pull the plug on the idea. That's all I remember from that. I wasn't really, I guess, that week paying attention to the news as much, but what was the impetus for that? Just decided that maybe we don't want to go that direction, or do you even know why he decided to make that alteration to the programming?
You'd have to ask him. I can't. I'm not in his head. I have no idea. And honestly, you'd have to ask him. I don't know why he chose to do what he did.
Well, I'm delighted you landed on your feet. Yeah, maybe because I'm actually 6 miles from SpaceX, where they launched their Starship thing. So maybe I'll cruise over there and go, Elon, got a question for you. The next thing is like, who are you? And here's my security. So as you're going along, what were you getting feedback from people? Your mother, your family. What were they thinking about the trajectory of where you were going? Because now they're seeing you on TV, they're seeing your point of view, maybe in ways they hadn't seen it before. What was the feedback from your family, seeing you nightly, hearing you? Everybody's family's got opinions.
Look, my sister every night before my sister passed unexpectedly, and she died of an accidental drowning in 2018. She used to watch every night. She would actually she had a couple of them. It was CNN Tonight with Don Lemon T-shirts, and so she would buy one and she would wear it every night, right? And she'd have to wash it or whatever, and then she'd wear that one out or wear the two or whatever the spares out, and then she'd go, I need some more shirts, because she would like sit and watch every night. My mom sat and watched every night. My other sister sat and watched every night. My nieces sat and watched every night. My cousin sat and watched every night. And sometimes they agreed with me pretty much most of the time. Other times they didn't, but most of them knew, like, that's my job. My sister, who, is an expert hair colorist, I didn't come into her work and say, you know what, you should have made that a little blonder or you should have made that a little redder or whatever. I don't like that color. They knew that this is his job, and that's it. My sister would just go, ooh, you scared me. Be careful, because, you never know. They might get mad at something that you're saying. And I'm like, well, I said, sis, one day that will happen and we'll have to deal with it.
What did your folks do? What was their background? Was anybody in your family, or was media or journalism part of what they had going on?
My mom worked at Exxon Chemicals. So originally, my mom and my dad met. My mom was walking to college, and she passed a law office that said he was looking for a legal secretary. She applied and became his secretary, and then eventually I became the product of that. And then, so my real dad was an attorney. And then years later, my real dad died, and then years later, my mom remarried, and my dad was a pipe fitter at Exxon Chemicals.
Hmm.
They also met at work, and then so my mom was a head of purchasing, like purchasing for the chlorobutyl something, whatever at Exxon, which was the rubber and pallets and all those things. So she was a professional woman who had a big time title, and my dad was a pipe fitter, and then he was retired, and she worked. And then he died, and then she retired a couple of years later. But that's what my parents did.
You took a path less traveled in the Lemon family there.
Oh yeah.
So, you're not having the hecticness of the network schedule. Are you able to kind of travel a little bit more? How's life changed for you as well since the routine of network news?
Well, I don't travel as much for work, obviously. Well, in a different capacity, because I still do travel and I do speaking engagements, and people ask me to do things. I'm on a book tour, so I travel. But I used to travel for work, to do work stories a lot more, that were directly involved in news. With my job, you got to go to DC to do this. You got to go, blah, blah, blah. I still do those things, but it's in a different capacity. Like, now, when I went to DC, I went to, you know, um, moderate a talk for the Congressional Black Caucus, right? When usually I would go to DC because, okay, you need to interview Senator such and such.
Mm.
So it's different. But the routine has changed. It's like I don't wake up in the morning and go, I gotta tune into the network editorial call and what they're doing and blah blah blah. I have my own live editorial call for the whoever wants to watch it around the world on YouTube. Um, it's a live call because I do a 10 a.m. show that I call Hot Topics, where we discuss everything that's going on, and I try to get people up to date. So that is my morning call. But before that, it's just me and my producer and a writer. And we decide, like, hey, what do you want to put in there? We want to talk this morning. Like this morning, I said, can you get a live picture on YouTube for Netanyahu's going to be speaking when we go live at 10 a.m. And so it's very similar and on a smaller scale of what I did. And so I don't have the exact sort of routine, but if I don't want to do it, I don't have to do it. I can say there's no show today, or I'm traveling.
Yeah.
I'll be on a plane to Los Angeles and there's no show. I'll join you when I get to Los Angeles, and I put the show on whenever I want to put the show on.
Do you like that freedom? Do you like that being able to kind of craft it how you want to craft it, because people have a means of watching sitting in their pocket? It's different from when you were coming up what we thought it was going to be.
That's where it's going. Listen, there's still a place for cable and broadcast, or there's still a place for the networks. But more and more, I think independent media is going to catch on more and more. And I think those of us, there were people who got into this space a long before I did, but I think there's still room now. But as broadcast and corporate media starts to diminish even more, a lot of people are going to have to be in these spaces. Mm-hmm. And I think the timing for me is good, because I kind of got in, while it was still good, where you can still build an audience. There's a lot of competition out there, but there's going to be a lot more competition in this market. I would say in about a year or so, if not sooner.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's more democratized, if you will, a means of kind of putting something together and kind of letting the market decide. Do they like it or do they not? I remember coming up when I was studying broadcast journalism. I remember the journalism department, the news department, was kind of a loss leader for a network. They weren't looking at it as a big revenue kind of operation. Do you think there was a shift?
Yep.
And that shift kind of changed the game quite a bit. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
We talked about that, and we talked about that at dinner recently, about what the shift was and some people say the shift was kind of cable news helped that, because people could tune in 24 hours a day and, run your ads, and it became sort of a profit center. But it was really, I think they said, actually, scratch that. I take that back. It was when some of the deregulation happened around media, and I believe that was Nixon, right? And then news organizations started to become profit driven.
Plus, I think the telecom deregulation, I think when Clinton was president, I think 94, I think is kind of when basically you had all these big media companies started swallowing up the smaller fish. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that. So, it was a couple of different things. And then people realized, we can. So, and the other thing, which was the cable part of it, was that people realized that you didn't have to send reporters everywhere. You didn't have to, even though CNN did a great job and they were doing that, you could just have a couple of people sitting around a table giving their opinions and talking about the news rather than sending out reporters to do whatever. So and it was cheap programming. And then they realized, wow, we can make money from this. We can just keep doing it 24 hours a day.
It's funny because when I studied, I'm going back. I mean, I didn't. I mean, closest journalism I got, I did a tiny bit of reporting, but I was a news writer while I was in college. And I remember one of my professors said something like, no matter how hard you try to be unbiased, you come from a place you could put all your effort into not being biased, but there's going to be some inherent bias. Kind of like going back to what we talked about Anthony Bourdain, he said, you could travel to China constantly and you're still never going to understand the Eastern culture. You're never fully going to digest it. What things did you do personally? Because I kind of think it's farcical. People say things are very biased or whatever. That's subjective. But what things were you doing to kind of what little checks or questions would you ask yourself going, did I do this? Did I examine that, to make sure that you personally are being as unbiased as you can be? What discipline did you develop for yourself to go, here, I want to make sure I'm clearly telling this story?
Okay, so the discipline I learned from working in local news, network news, broadcast network news, and cable news. And the rigors are that you have to go through, the hoops that you have to jump through in order to get things on the air. In traditional media, I don't think the average person understands what that is and how rigorous it is, especially at CNN. It was extremely rigorous. So that's still in my DNA. And I think also, quite frankly, Mark, I think it hinders me a little bit in this new independent thing that I'm doing, because people who have gained the most success here, there are no controls. There are no levers there's no editorial rigor, no editorial standards, nothing. It's just, pedal to the metal.
Right.
And your opinion or whatever doesn't matter. If you look at the most successful people who are the most successful streamers, broadcasters, digital content creators, it's people who don't have to abide by facts. And it's all opinion. So for me, I will say, I have to abide by facts. I know that's not true and blah, 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 blah. And, there are people who are in this game who give me advice and they say, Don, you're too careful. And so I think that I am too careful with that. It's just in my DNA. So it comes to me naturally and innately that I'm not going to say something that is fictitious. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to embellish. I can't do it. I can have a personality, and I can be a good performer, but it's not in my DNA to lie or embellish and, or just to do something that is reckless. But for this whole thing, which I think is a problem, all the misinformation that we have, if you're looking at social and whatever, you can say and do whatever you want. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not. And those, sadly, are the most successful people in independent media.
You only have to look at Alex Jones going, every time I see that, I'd hear about him. I'm like, who's watching this? There's a whole segment of the world I'm just not. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. There are.
You look at I know you saw the things recently with the streamers who, unwittingly, they say, were being co-opted by Russia, right? Mm-hmm. To produce and distribute disinformation in their content, and to be positive about Russia, negative about Ukraine, and to create a narrative to confuse people in America about our politics. And they were some of the most successful streamers and influencers and the biggest platforms in the country.
What do you think precipitated that? Generally, I understand it's the internet, being able to, everybody can, which I think is wonderful. Everybody can have a literal and figurative voice out there. But what happened where I grew up? I remember like Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, Ted Koppel. I'm trying to remember the anchors I'd watch. There wasn't a lot of color, if you will. It was information, and the shift happened. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but it seems like it really didn't stop happening. It really went, like you said, to the far end where people are just saying anything they want. Is there a way back from that you see or do you think there's going to be an appetite from people like, I want something a little bit more substantive, and I don't want it as much opinion, or I don't want it as much BS, for lack of a better way of putting it. What is the way back to get, is it guys like yourself that could do something independently but still maintain editorial standards? I mean, how do you think we get back to that place of the way we grew up, if you will?
I don't think that's going to happen, Mark. I really don't. I don't think that, look, people said, oh man, this new TV medium, radio is great. Why do we have to go to TV or whatever?
Yeah.
And then the TV folks now are sort of in the thing where, saying like, well, this TV thing is great. Why do we have to go into streaming? Or listen, we've got vinyl records. Why are we going to these cassettes? Or why are we going to these 8-tracks? And the 8-tracks become cassettes, and the cassettes become CDs. And now it's all, you just click a button and you have it, whatever music that you want. So we've evolved. And I think the medium will evolve. And I think it's actually going to get worse with AI.
Yeah.
Because you won't know what's real and what's not. And the folks, sadly, many of the folks who are in control of the platforms, whether it be social or digital or networks, they care about profits, and they care about, many of them want to spread a certain narrative. The algorithms move people into silos, and sometimes it pushes them really far right, and sometimes it pushes them really far left. And unless we get some sort of regulation and some sort of shared consensus on what is real and what is not, and that we have to put factual information out there, then I think it's only going to get worse. I don't see us recovering from this. Sorry, I don't know if that's the answer you wanted.
No, I think that's exactly why I wanted your opinion on that, because it is something that for millennials, for my kids' age, they don't remember an era where you can kick on the TV at 5, 6, and 10, and you're going to be getting pretty much facts uncolored, if you will. And of course, things evolve. I mean, how can it not exponentially? With everybody having a phone in their pocket. But do you see yourself craving getting back into broadcast news in the traditional sense? Or do you think that this frontier is one that really needs more exploration for you?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I never thought that I would be on cable news, right? It was never my goal to be on cable news. Like I said, I wanted to be, Bryant Gumbel or Peter Jennings, which was a network news anchor. And, I got to the network and then moved out and then came back. But,
I know they say man plans, God laughs, but I mean, it's
it's true. Look, I would never say never about, it depends on if someone offered me something that was great, or if I felt that was a great opportunity to be able to practice my craft and to be able to inform people, then I would do it. I don't have the same sort of ambition that I had. Like I had to get to a certain level. I've gotten to the top of this profession. And so now for me, my priorities have changed, and my priorities now are my priority is to inform people. Mm-hmm. And I realize that, you can be at any part or any level of this business, and it's still sort of the same craft. As long as you're practicing and you're doing the same thing, it feels good. Mm-hmm. I don't feel any different when I'm sitting here talking, doing my digital show in my studio than I did when I was at CNN. I mean, it was a much bigger, shinier facility with a bigger infrastructure, but it's still the same thing. It's still the same camera.
Yeah, you had COVID is kind of a training ground a little bit.
Exactly right. It prepared us for people to be more relaxed. And people started watching people in their homes, bringing them the news to their homes. And they're like, okay, well, now it's normalized. No one can, I could give the news right here. And, mm-hmm. Which I do. This is my home studio. This is not my big, I have a big studio, which is really nice and grand. But I can do it from here and nobody cares. As a matter of fact, I do a 5:00 show every day that I didn't plan on doing because I wanted to talk to my subscribers and grow my own community. And I said, well, this feels weird because I'm doing sort of similar to what I was doing on CNN, and I don't really have a connection with the viewer. Mm-hmm. And I have the opportunity now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go live at 5 every day, a show where I talk to my subscribers and we talk about what they're interested in. We read their comments or whatever. And I said, I'm just going to try it from my living room. And I did, and they loved it. And then I put a survey. I was like, look, I spent all this money on a studio. Where would you guys rather that I do it from? And they're like, do it from your house. We like you from your house, Don. Do it from your house. And so all of the, sort of the mechanics and the what do you call them? The
Formatting?
trappings
Oh.
and the formality of the networks, I think, is kind of young people don't want or care about that.
Yeah, I think it's dissipating a little bit. You remember anytime you're doing, I mean, when you're doing an interview, be it somebody in politics, anybody, they're going to have to go to their local TV station, set up a satellite feed and come in. Now it's like, oh, just stay at home, kick on whatever. Isn't that, your phone. And
It's right here.
it's so funny because now we'll go back to your former network. Anytime they interview somebody, everybody, by the way, my favorite thing now is looking at how people set up their camera shot. What books they put in their shelves, because they're thinking about it. It's like, what's the Rorschach here? How am I interpreting this? But to go to your book real quick, obviously based on the title, is there faith? Is there religion? Is that something that is a component part of this? So I don't mean to sound reductive, but what's kind of the gist, the impetus for this? You said that George Floyd, that kind of started the ball rolling for you.
Well, that started the ball rolling for the first book, right?
Oh, the 2021 book. I'm sorry.
2021 book, But this one also happened out of that one. I was writing that one, and we talked a lot about God and faith in that one. And then, it's funny, after the paperback came out for that, and I was on the phone with my collaborator, and she said, I have an idea, I think, for your next book. And we both sort of said religion at the same time. Mm-hmm. And we're like, that's it. And so I wanted to, the reason I wrote this book, this book was supposed to be a coda to This Is the Fire. And then, I left CNN and I put it down for a while. And then when I picked it back up, it became a much different book. But this book is really about how my love of God, my love of country really shaped me into the person that I am today and helped me to fight against the toxic evangelical teachings that sought to marginalize me. And so I wanted to talk about
how did you grow up? Me being a Texas boy,
I grew up Baptist.
Oh, Baptist.
I grew up Baptist. And going to a Catholic school. So there was lots of God, lots of Bible study. So I would have catechism during the week at the Catholic school and Mass on Friday at the Catholic school. And then on Sunday, I would go to, early morning church service at my missionary Baptist church in my hometown, and then the evening as well. So there was a lot of God and Jesus and Bible study.
When I moved from Texas, everybody was Southern Baptist where I was from. Go to New Orleans, everybody's Catholic. So it's kind of funny. You said your school in Louisiana, you're going to end up in a Catholic school at least once. But for you, what was that experience like? Because of course you, I think publicly, and I don't know where I read this, please correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't come out as being gay until far into your adulthood, publicly, if you will. Growing up though, what was it like though? I mean, growing in a Southern Baptist, you're in Louisiana, red state. How was that for you, being you, kind of having your desires, goals, and aspirations in life and living differently than people around you? What was that like?
I talk about that in the book. It was difficult because when you're a kid, you kind of have magical thinking, right? You know that there's, I knew what my sexuality was without even knowing without it being sexual. Mm-hmm. If as long as I could remember. But when you're a kid, and then when you start to get a little bit older and you know what it is, but you can't quite put your finger on it, you start to pray. So I started to pray like this would go away, this sort of attraction that I had and crushes that I had on my friends and that kind of things.
So you were doubting yourself in many ways. Was the religion aspect of things making you think you were less than in some way?
Yeah, because I was, religion told me that I was an abomination. At least the folks who were, that's the way that people were interpreting the scriptures, which now I know it's not what it is. That people interpret the scriptures in ways that they want to. But I tried to pray the gay away. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting in the pews just before I got baptized, praying that I would pray the gay away, right? And I thought, when you're a kid or you're a young person, you believe in magical thinking. Look, we believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and that sort of continued. And so I would pray, and then it never happened. And then as I got older and I realized, critical thinking, I'm like, well, that's never going to happen. This is just who I am. So that holding that secret was very tough. And, once I came out, and once I moved to New York and I came out, it was, especially when I came out in my first book in 2011 to the public, it was a weight and lifted off of my shoulder. And that's when I started to gain some sort of, I became self-possessed and I gained autonomy, and I realized the power that I had as a human being.
It's unique in that, I don't mean to keep going back to CNN, but of course you and Anderson Cooper are both very high profile gay men in America. Did y'all ever have any powwows? Like, hey, what's this experience like?
No. So as I wrote in 2011, when I came out in 2011, it was, I think Rachel Maddow was out. She was on MSNBC. And not she did not have the profile that she has now. She did not have the success. She's very good. It was gaining. She was gaining momentum, but she wasn't like Rachel Maddow like she is
Right,
now.
right.
And then there was another person who was at Headline News, Thomas Roberts, who was an anchor on Headline News, and me, and that was it. And so there was no roadmap for me. There was no one I could really relate to, because the rules are different for a black man. So I was a black man in an industry that was basically a white industry, and dealing with already, having being a minority in the business. I was like, oh, so I have that, and hopefully, I can survive, and one day someone will believe that a black man can carry a show in prime time, which eventually did happen. And then I said, you know what, I'm on this great trajectory, and I'm going to ruin it all by just being honest about who I am. And so there was no powwow. I didn't talk to Anderson about it. Anderson was not out then. And I mean, he may have been resentful for me even asking him about it. So I don't think that, so there wasn't that. And we just didn't have that kind of a relationship, although we were friendly. But the first person, honestly, to like send me flowers and congratulate me, one of them was Rachel Maddow, and the other one was Charles Barkley.
As far as how it landed with your family, were they cheering you on? Were they like, be careful? What kind of feedback were you getting from them?
Well, I had come out to my family by then, and they were basically, whatever, we will be supportive of whatever it is, because we had already gone through, what it is that we would have to do, right? What it is that if they had any issues with me coming out or my sexuality, we had already dealt with that. We'd already gone through it. And so they were just at a point where they were very supportive of me. And I read the book to my mom, and we discussed it, but always my mom and I have the best open relationship. So that wasn't a big deal, but it was mostly support from my family. Now from the public, mostly support. But also a lot of bigotry, a lot of homophobia, a lot of name calling from, people who are just not willing to of the reality that gay people exist and should exist in this culture with all equal rights. And for people who say, oh, it's not a big deal, I think visibility is important, because I don't know necessarily if people would have to come out now. I think we'll get to a day where it doesn't matter, but I do think visibility is important. And for all those people who are saying, well, I don't need to know, and it's like, well, I don't need to know that you're heterosexual, but you talk about your wife, you wear a wedding band, you have your kids, pictures on your desk, and every day that signals to me that you are a heterosexual person in a heterosexual marriage. And so why can't I be just as open and candid about who I am? And so I don't assume when people say, I don't need to know what you do in your bedroom. It's like, well, you as a straight person, and I see you, I don't even think about what you do in your bedroom. Because I say that I'm married to a man or in a relationship with that, you automatically assume that you have to think about what I do in my bedroom. That says more about you than it does about me.
Yeah, like I told me, because I'd rather, a happy world is hopefully a safer, more chill world. And if people are doing what they want to do without or being able to express themselves in a way which brings them joy without any grief, that's that's optimal. And that's right. Of course, I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to that, and think people are all inherently good. They just need to kind of learn a little bit more. Who do you think right now, when you are looking for commentary, when you are looking for insight it's intelligent, that makes sense, who are you looking to? Kind of in your mutual admiration society, kind of who's out there that you're paying attention to right now?
Well, I love Nicholas Kristof. That's a different thing. If you're asking me about people who are in broadcast, I respect all of my colleagues over at CNN. I kind of admire what Rachel Maddow has done. If you're talking about broadcast cable news figures, I admire what Rachel has done by sort of reinventing herself in what she's doing. She's still doing her show, but then she's branching out and doing other things in the business and informing people in other ways, and rather than just on a daily or a nightly newscast. I mean, she's doing documentaries and books and whatever. So I respect that. I I respect folks like Judy Woodruff and that kind of and those sorts of folks, but I'm not that sort of traditional old school model of the news is not necessarily attractive to me anymore. Um, so that's really about it. And, quite frankly, one of my favorite shows to watch in the morning is Morning Joe, and I know that is very opinionated, a point of view, but that's what I want in the morning, and I want to, give it to me straight, no chaser, and I like that.
One thing I was curious about in terms of how news has changed, not really news, but culture sociologically, to be called out by the president, the leader of the free world, and to be called out by name. How was it? Was that disorienting for you? Didn't Trump at one point in time, didn't he bring you
Yeah,
up and criticize? And it's sort of
more
like,
than at one point, a couple of times.
didn't
Yeah.
it feel like, it's like, wait, when there's a line of delineation, you're not really supposed to comment on us, and we've got to jump. What was that like? Was your response pretty quick? Like, I know how I'm going to respond, or were you just had to take a moment with yourself to figure it all out?
Well, most of the time I was not aware of it. Other people had to make me aware. Like I would get texts saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. This guy's such a jerk." Or they didn't use that word; they used a different word.
Hmm.
Um, goes with a donkey. And I would say, "Why? Who are you talking about?" And they said, "Oh, the president." And I'm like, "I have no idea what you're talking about," because I stopped following him on Twitter and on social media because I had to cover him. And I'm like, I'm already going to know what he said and what I have to cover.
Right.
So why do I have to follow him? It's just anxiety inducing. And so, they would send it to me, and I go, I really don't want to know. I didn't. So it didn't matter to me. I didn't care about him actually saying it because I think he was. It was kind of embarrassing that he even knew who I was as the president of the United States. That he really cared what a cable news anchor was doing. It was just shocking, stunning to me. But the other part that was the concerning part was that it put my life in danger. It put my family in danger. I would get death threats. I couldn't take the subway anymore. At times, I could not go out in public. My mom had to occasionally have the police in front of her house. People would call the station and threaten to kill me or stab me in the neck, and then later, collectively, the pipe bombs would somehow, mysteriously make their way or arrive at CNN. And so that's the thing that bothered me. It wasn't really him saying things about me. I just found it embarrassing that he did.
As we wrap up here, I do kind of a quick fire off of 7 quick, just fun questions for you, just the last bit of get to know you. You being from Louisiana, I got to ask you, what is your favorite comfort food?
Oh, the best day is like a really, really good batch of crawfish, fresh crawfish right out of the boil. That's it.
Are you a potato, corn, or sausage, or what parts of that boil are you bringing along for the ride, or is it just
Potatoes
crawfish?
and corn are good, but I'm straight up crawfish. I mean, I prefer. I like both of them. I would say I prefer the corn better than potato. But if you do the potato just right, I'm all in. But mostly it's the crawfish for me.
Yeah.
And we're out of crawfish season, and I'm craving them now. So darn you.
Yeah, I was talking to Andrew Zimmern once. He was talking about Deanie's in Bucktown. Did you ever make your way there in New Orleans? And
I know Deanie's. I've done Deanie's. Their char grilled oysters,
yeah.
and yeah, yeah.
Oh, they have something. They have the barbecue shrimp. That thing. Basically, it's just a lot of pepper, butter. Oh, God, now you can tell I haven't had lunch yet.
Yeah.
Next question, real quick, is 3 people. You're sitting down to talk story. Living or not, who would be 3 people you would want to sit down and have coffee with?
Oh, and people will say besides Jesus. So 3 people I want to sit down and have coffee with. I think one would be James Baldwin. The other would be Coretta Scott King.
Okay.
And the other one would be, I didn't think about this because I get a third. The third choice would
Mhm.
be, let me think, because there are several names come to mind, but I just want to make sure that I'm thinking about everyone. This is going to sound really, really weird. Okay, so it would be James Baldwin, Coretta Scott King, and Judy Garland.
I like those good combos. They make for like a fun conversation because it'd just be you'd want to enjoy them talking with one another as well. That'd be just kind of a fun thing to watch.
Well,
Um,
one of them is like one of the most talented people I thought to ever live, entertainment wise, and that was Judy Garland. And then Coretta Scott King, who was married to Dr. King, and I would want her perspective as a woman because I think she was just as extraordinary as he was.
mhm.
And James Baldwin was not only, he wasn't a brand, he was a firebrand, and he was before his time, and he spoke out and wrote on things and pushed things into the consciousness that many people than most
Yeah, I love seeing
people
his quotes pop up on social
brave.
media. I'm a big
Yeah,
meme fan. Every time I see a quote of his pop up, I'm like, I identify with that. I
yeah.
probably need to sit down with a book. I actually really kind of dive into his material a little bit more, most certainly. I got a third question, which is this is the fun one. Who's celebrity crush as a kid? Who was your first big celebrity crush?
Oh well, it wasn't my only one, but this is going to sound crazy. It was Tom Jones.
Okay.
Not unusual to be loved by anyone.
Okay,
Ba-da-da-da.
I can see that.
My big crush. That was like a kid. I didn't know. I like to see Tom Jones perform, and then later I realized that when I was a little bit older, like, wow, he was actually a handsome man when I was a kid. I don't think I realized it was a kid, but I was in love with Farrah Fawcett. Love Farrah Fawcett.
Everybody
My
had
good.
that poster. That's an iconic
Whoa. I
poster,
had the poster, I had the mug, and I was so heartbroken when she left Charlie's Angels. I
That's
mean, literally heartbroken.
that was a special era. I was catching some more stuff in reruns by that point in time, but it's like, oh yes, who's this? Of course, you get a little bit older, you pay attention a little bit more. But fourth of the seven is you're going to be living on an island, beautiful island. It's a resort. It's exactly where you want to be for a whole year, but they don't have internet. You got to bring one album, one CD with you, and that's going to be your entertainment because you can't stream anything. What would that album be, and what would that movie, that DVD be?
So the movie DVD would be All About Eve with Betty Davis. That shows you how gay I am. And the album would be Judy Garland live at Carnegie Hall.
Definition of a perfect day, stem to stern. From the time you get up to go to bed, what are the component parts for you to say, God, this was a good day?
There would be an ocean or beach with beautiful, warm blue water. There would be hopefully some sort of seafood, shellfish, crawfish, shrimp, crab, something like that. With my partner and my family there as well. And
Mhm.
that's it for me. Now, I also do love rainy days too. So I love rainy days with a remote control and an old black and white movie too.
Very
Yeah.
nice.
Oh, my
Very
dogs. Don't forget my dogs.
well. What kind of dogs do you? I've heard them, but what kind of
I,
dogs do you have?
I have three dogs. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but they're poodle-ish, poodle-esque, because they're all rescues.
They're
They're
poodle
all,
adjacent. Yeah,
yeah, they're poodle adjacent. They're all rescues, and they're naughty but lovable at
but
the
that's
same time.
that's that's they should be. Yeah, I've got my little puppy who's surprisingly quiet right now. Now, next question: if you weren't doing this for a living, journalism, if this was not in the cards, what could you see yourself doing that would bring you joy besides this?
Oh, well, I think other than acting would be great if I could act in a movie, and probably being maybe a movie or a television producer or director. I would like to do that, but that's a whole nother show. That's a
But
whole
that,
nother life.
but here you are creating. You're creating books now. You never, you could take the book, turn it into a screenplay. There's, something else you can.
I think
That's
I would be a fantastic Oscar-winning actor. I really do. You
awesome.
never know. Maybe I could. Maybe I should get into it.
Now, last question. If you're going to jump in that DeLorean, you're going to have a moment with yourself. You're going to go back in time, 16 years old, and you got a piece of advice for yourself. You're able to go back for a moment and see 16-year-old you and say, here, take this to heart. This is a piece of advice that will serve you well.
I would say don't worry about what people think about you, and go out, and if you really want to be the ruler of the world, you can do it. There are no limits. I wish I had known that, because we always second guess ourselves, and we tend to care what people think about us. And I don't now, but the older I get, I really don't. And I think it's your options are limitless. That's what I would say. And spend more time with your family.
You remind me of one of my favorite Latin quotes. I think it's viam inveniam aut faciem. I think it's basically, I'll either find a way or I'll make one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you've done a wonderful job of that. And I wish you nothing but the best, my friend, because this has been a real pleasure to sit down with you to hear the story again. I once was lost. My search for God in America.
Also, you can tune into YouTube too. It's youtube.com/@ the @ the Don Lemon Show.
I'll put that up on the site. That way I have all your socials. I sincerely appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. Congratulations on the book. I've really enjoyed watching the construction worker dangling, I don't know how many floors up behind you there. I don't know if I could ever do that job, but I'm sure he gets compensated well for it, So.
We are 7 and 8 stories up.
Now,
I used to live on the 66th floor. Can you imagine? And people would do that.
I get chills just thinking. Strangely, I can fly an airplane, but I do not like being really high up. And I know it's ironic, but enjoy the rest of. Hey, it's the weekend now, so enjoy your weekend. Thank you again for your time, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck, my friend.
Thank you as well.
Okay, there you go, Don Lemon. What a really informative, intriguing chat. Really enjoyed the opportunity to sit down and learn a little bit more about his story, where he came from. The Don Lemon we know from CNN, What Is Next? YouTube, the thing he's doing now. And of course, as we discussed, he's an author. New book out right now, I Once Was Lost, My Search for God in America. It is available everywhere you pick up books, but as Don and I were discussing, go find a local bookstore and pick it up. Always great to support local bookstores when you can. Of course, he's got his show on YouTube and on all the socials, but as of right now, no longer on X. As of the taping of the show, he was still on X, and then last week, he left. Like many people have. But you can go to storyandcraftpod.com and you can find everywhere Don is on the socials, Blue Sky, YouTube, everywhere else. In fact, you can find out about every one of our guests that's been on, their story, where you can find them on social media, all that kind of good stuff. And of course, as always, please go grab your podcast app, follow the show, get those notifications every time there is a new episode. Leave a review. And of course, you can also just like an episode, throw stars our way. That is fantastic. Tell you what, I'm going to get on out of here. I've got the puppy Ranger underneath me. I say puppy. The little guy is like 9 months old, and he is 60 pounds. It's insane. And of course, I'm very elated now because he actually walks up and down the stairs on his own now. Up until a couple of weeks ago, I was carrying him. So for those who are following the progress of the growth of the pup here, that's kind of where we're at. And he's asleep under my feet right now as we speak. By the way, for those in the United States and expats abroad, happy Thanksgiving. Have a great Thanksgiving week. Eat, celebrate, spend some time with family and friends. My son Zachary is coming into town from school in New Orleans, and the young baby diva, Emma, is going to be here from Boca Raton. So I got 2 of the 3 going to be here with the pooch, so, I'll report back, and we'll see how that goes. So go have a great weekend, by the way. Great week, great holiday, and whatever you're doing, again, thank you so much for making Story and Craft part of whatever you got going on. And tell you what, I'm out of here, but I will see you next time right here on Story and Craft.
That's it for this episode of Story and Craft. Join Mark next week for more conversation right here on Story and Craft. Story and Craft is a presentation of Mark Preston Productions, LLC. Executive producer is Mark Preston. Associate producer is Zachary Holden. Please rate and review Story and Craft on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. You can subscribe to show updates and stay in the know. Just head to storyandcraftpod.com and sign up for the newsletter. I'm Emma Dillon. See you next time, and remember, keep telling your story.
Come on.